Thank you, Doug. My name is Jim. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, buddy. I'm glad to be here tonight. So, our joke maven Audrey has run out of lawyer jokes. You'll be happy to know that, Pat. But she came up with one that I thought was pretty good. I'll pass it along to you. There are these four drunks that are driving down the street. One of them was from Idaho, another one was from Iowa, the third one was from New York, and the fourth one was from Florida. And they're driving down the street, and all of a sudden the drunk from Iowa opens up a window and starts throwing corn out the window. So, what are you doing? Well, I'm getting so sick of having that damn corn I can't stand it anymore. A few minutes later, the drunk from Idaho rolls down the window and he starts throwing potatoes out of the car. What are you doing? Why, I'm so sick of potatoes I can't stand to see another potato as long as I live. They drove along a little ways further. The drunk from Florida rolled down the window and threw the New Yorker out of the car. And when we do our 11-step inventory, we're going to look back on our day to see what happened today. And one of the things that was so impressed upon me was the absolute necessity of the 11th step as a daily exercise, a daily routine, something that would become as much a part of me as any other part of my day, eating or sleeping, bathing, whatever. And over a period of time, that's exactly what happened. It's something I simply do, part of the way I live my life. And when I'm teaching others, I try to make sure that they have every opportunity to take the 11th step and make it a part of their life. And at first, you know, when you have these things to do every day, you kind of have to make ourselves do it. The proper use of our will, the big book says, is to will ourselves to take right action. And so, after a while, though, this becomes so important, and any time that we begin to ignore or procrastinate on the 11th step, or we just don't do it, we feel it. We really feel it. We realize there's something different about us. I think I shared this with you last week, that people with long-term sobriety who find themselves in trouble, it's almost always because they've been ignoring or evading doing the 11th step. And it's amazing, you know, somebody been around 20 years and they're feeling terrible and they're running around with untreated alcoholism. The moment they get back on the spiritual path by working the 11th step, they straighten out real quick. It's just like magic. And there's a good reason for this. And we found out what that reason was all the way back in our third step, that we were required if we wish to have God give us everything we need, we're required to stay close to Him. And also, of course, to perform His work. And staying close to God turns out to be the major function of the 11th step. It's the way that we grow spiritually. And so when we look at it from that standpoint, it really is not just something nice to do, or we do it because we feel better when we do it, but because it's really a matter of life and death. Because if we don't progress spiritually, we regress. And spiritual regression turns into untreated alcoholism, and you know what happens to us then. So when we look at the 11th step, we covered this a little bit last week, but let's just make sure we're on the same page here. It's going to start at the bottom of page 85 and continue on 86, 87, and 88. The 11th step is composed of 3 parts, not 2. The first part of the 11th step, the one we reach first as we read, is the 11th step inventory, which is not the 10th step. It is the 11th step. They're 2 separate inventories. One's done during the day. 11th step inventory is done at night. 11th step inventory is there because we need each day to check ourselves to see if we're on the path, to see if we are in fact doing what the steps require of us, that we practice these principles in all of our affairs. And to do that, it means that we will live a principled and spiritual way of life. This is the way we live our lives, in accordance with the steps. And so in the 11th step inventory, we're going to find out if in fact that we've been doing that, and whether we've gotten off the path or strayed from the chosen ideal. To do that, we ask ourselves a series of 10 questions every night. Now, I think we reviewed those last week, but we'll go through them very quickly again tonight. The second and third parts of the 11th step are prayer and meditation. Now, prayer and meditation go together. They're Siamese twins. When we pray, it is a form of meditation. When we meditate, it is a form of prayer. And many people would like to avoid meditation, thinking it's some kind of an Eastern practice or metaphysical or mystical or something, and that in order to meditate you got to have some guy with a saffron robe and ringing a little bell and having incense and crystals and candles and doing om, 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 and sitting cross-legged and all that stuff. And others believe that we can't meditate without somebody telling us how to do it. As we meditate, to hear this voice droning in our ear. Some think we can't meditate unless we've got some sort of electronic noise in the background, whining in our ears, sort of simulating something or other, waves or wind or something. So then, we're told that we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection. And you would think, well, gee, that's good advice because I'll be able to get to sleep, it'll get away from worry and all that stuff, but that's not what the book says. It says, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. Now that's entirely consistent, and every time we get to a crucial point, the book reminds us why we're doing this. We're doing this to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to others. In other words, for us to be able to be of maximum service to God, for us to fulfill our mission. And so, by living our lives free of remorse and worry and morbid reflection, we will be far better able to be of maximum service to others. Now then, we come to the last sentence in this paragraph, and this is really important. It's the only place in the big book where we are specifically instructed to ask God for forgiveness. Now, when we got to our 4th step, we found out how this works. What it told us there was if we were sincerely sorry for what we've done and are willing to let God take us on to better things, that we'd be forgiven. And if we're not sorry, and our conduct continues to harm others, we're quite sure to drink. And so after making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. We're demonstrating here our willingness to let God take us on to better things. And it is under these circumstances that we are quite sure to be forgiven. So you can't really get past that paragraph without recognizing there's much work to be done and just how critically important it is to do that work. Now the next paragraph on page 86 is where we pick up tonight. This is where we start our day. And remember that as we look back in our third step, we found that our problem was selfishness and self-centeredness and self-seeking and self-pity and self-delusion. That our problems arose out of ourself. And that an alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot. In other words, we had to put aside all the excuses. We had to quit blaming other people. We had to start taking responsibility for our own lives and what has happened up to this point. And so here is a prayer. This is a little exercise we go through in the morning, which we hope will allow us to stay out of self. Upon awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Now here's a real good opportunity to put everything in writing. Just make a little agenda for ourselves of what we have in front of us to do today. Something that tonight we can go back and check to see how well we did. And for those of us who like to procrastinate, who get a tad lazy once in a while or forgetful, we write this stuff down. It's amazing how it just pulls it right into focus. And so, pretty hard to make any of that stuff portable. You can't carry it around with you. So, what would be the use of learning how to meditate? And we find, though, that since meditation is not optional, we're going to have to find a better way. And the Big Book, of course, gives us that way. It's not going to let us down. And then, of course, we have prayer and meditation. Prayer, in the Big Book, prayer bookends meditation. First we pray, then we meditate, then we pray again. And we'll see how that works too. Now, if you'll turn to the top of page 86, we'll quickly review the 11-step inventory. This should be in writing. It is highly recommended that you keep a journal, not only because we need to write this stuff down, but because it's wonderful to create a history of your sobriety and your spiritual growth. And it's something that you'll cherish. And over the years, you fill your journals and you can look back and you can see the amazing things that have happened in your life. And many times that will be enough to resuscitate your faith if your faith starts to fade, because you can go back and you can see how many times you've been blessed and how many times miracles have been worked in your life. From dishonest or self-seeking motives. So now again, dishonesty and self-seeking. So these three things we ask God for in the morning, just asking Him to get our thinking up where it belongs. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. Now, you should know that when you start working the 11th step, you're taking a PhD in recovery. Because it's right here that we expand our horizons beyond our actions and begin to look very closely at our motives. And there's a good reason for that. When we get into chapter 7, we're going to see this question of motives is addressed in several places. And you see, bad motive doing the right thing for the wrong motive is just as dangerous to us as doing the wrong thing. It will block us from God just as surely as if we were doing the wrong thing. So we have to learn how to check our motives. And right here, we're doing something which we feel will engage God's help with us, so that we'll keep our motives on the right side and keep our thinking on a higher plane. And you notice that if our thinking is filled with wrong motives, it takes us back to what Bill was talking about clear back in the third step. That the problems we got into, and the fact that people were stepping on our toes and were hurting us and so on, and we thought they were really bad people, but if we really look closely, we would find that we were the ones who engendered that in the first place, because we had been acting on the basis of self. And we first looked to see if we have had any defects character crop up. Let's see what it says. When we retire at night, this is page 86, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? The 4 cardinal defects, same ones we look for in the 10th step, the same ones we look for in the 4th step. And so each of those is a separate question. Today was I resentful, today was I selfish, today was I dishonest, today was I afraid. This, of course, is the same thing as our 4-step inventory and our 10-step inventory. The 5th question, do we owe an apology? Now, of course, that brings to mind the 9th step, doesn't it? If I've hurt someone, the 10th step tells me I apologize immediately. I clear away that guilt, that harm immediately. So did I do that? And have I kept something to myself that should have been discussed with another person at once? Well, this question goes right to the 5th step, doesn't it? And the 10th step tells us we're to do this. If one of our defects crops up, we're going to ask God to remove it, and we're going to discuss it with another person at once. Or obviously as soon as we can, circumstances permitting. Did we do that? Or have we simply let that slip by? Were we kind and loving toward all? Remember that love and tolerance of others is our code, and we learned that in our 10th step. So we're looking back on our day to see if we practice kindness and love. Then, what could I have done better? That question is critically important, because it means we need to be self-aware, and we need to be honestly self-aware, and we need to be constructive in our thinking. And this is real important too, because it builds toward forgiveness. Forgiveness for us is a product of our seeing where we've gotten off the path, but being willing to let God take us on to better things. And we're going to be asking for forgiveness as we do this step. Was I thinking of myself most of the time? In other words, was I buried in self? And we know how deadly that can be, because when our minds are consumed with self, there's no place for God, is there? And then the last question, were we thinking what we could do for others or what we could pack into the stream of life? We get to look on today and see if we've been givers rather than takers. And that's a nice question to answer, especially if we've been doing what we're supposed to do. Now, Alrighty. I've been doing this stuff for a long time. I came in 1964, and God's been awful good to me since that time. And a big part of the reason for that is that right from the very beginning I was taught the steps. I was taught the steps by men who really knew what they were. One of the guys helped to write them. The other guy learned from the masters. And they passed what they knew along to me. And I've been doing what they told me to do back then, all those years ago, and I've been doing it every day, and it keeps on working. So what I do is when I have an opportunity to share with other alcoholics, I try to just pass along what I was taught. Now, if we look at meditation that way, then we find that meditation in its strongest aspect is just listening to God. Now, how can we do that? Well, remember when we were back on the prior page, on page 85, we found that as a result of all the work we've done, we have developed this vital sixth sense, which means that in fact we have established a connection. We've become God conscious. And therefore, we have the ability to be inspired, to have intuitive thoughts. We have that ability. It's been given to us as a result of the work that we've done. And so it isn't a useless exercise, and it ought not to be something that we do simply to calm ourselves down, although quite often it will do that. Remember back in the fourth step, we were given the rule that it tells us in our morning meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter, and then it says that the right answer will come if we want it. So that seems to be a major key here. If I'm going to ask God what His will is for me, I better be willing to accept the answer. Otherwise, what's the point of asking?